My name is David, and for over 20 years I thought I had the perfect life. I lived in a picturesque town called Maplewood, a place where everyone knew each other, and life seemed idyllic. Our home, a charming colonial with a white picket fence, was the envy of the neighborhood. It was here that I lived with my wife, Emma. We never had kids, a decision we made early on to focus on our careers and each other. Emma worked as a marketing executive, and I owned a small but successful hardware store. We were the quintessential small-town couple, or so I thought. Maplewood was more than just a backdrop to our lives. It was a community that embraced us. We had friends who felt like family, and our weekends were often filled with barbecues, picnics, and community events. Emma was well-loved in our circle, always the life of the party with her infectious laughter and warm personality. She had a way of making everyone feel special, including me. For years I believed we were happy, content in our little corner of the world. Our home was a reflection of our life together, beautifully decorated, meticulously maintained, and filled with memories. From the vintage furniture that Emma lovingly restored to the garden we tended together, every corner of our house held a piece of our shared history. We spent countless evenings on the porch, sipping wine and talking about our dreams for the future. It was in these moments that I felt closest to Emma, convinced that our bond was unbreakable. But as I would come to learn, appearances can be deceiving. The cracks in our marriage, hidden beneath the surface, were about to shatter the facade of our perfect life. Little did I know that Maplewood, the place where I felt most secure, would soon become the backdrop for the most painful and transformative chapter of my life. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Emma's behavior began to change in ways that at first seemed innocent. She started working later, often claiming she had to stay for meetings or deadlines that never used to exist. Our evening routine of sitting on the porch, talking about our day, became less frequent. When I asked about her day, her answers were vague, filled with non-committal phrases like the usual or just busy. At first I chalked it up to the pressures of her job. Emma had always been ambitious, and I knew she was working hard for a promotion. But as the weeks turned into months, the changes became more pronounced. She started dressing differently, more provocatively, even when she wasn't going to the office. Her makeup, once minimal, became more elaborate, and she began buying new clothes more frequently. When I commented on her new look, she brushed it off, saying she just wanted to feel good about herself. Emma's phone became a constant companion. She was always texting, often smiling at her screen in a way that made my stomach twist. If I asked who she was talking to, she'd reply with a dismissive, "Just a friend from work," or "It's nothing important." She became secretive, turning her phone screen away from me and setting new passwords. Once I saw a message flash on her screen from someone named Sam, a name I'd never heard her mention before. When I asked, she said it was just a colleague and quickly changed the subject. Our sex life, once passionate and fulfilling, dwindled to almost nothing. Emma was always too tired or not in the mood. When we did make love, it felt mechanical, devoid of the intimacy we once shared. I tried to talk to her about it, but she became defensive, accusing me of being overbearing and paranoid. It was as if a wall had sprung up between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break through. Emma's social life also changed. She started going out more frequently, often without me. She'd say she was meeting friends or attending work functions, but when I offered to come along, she always had an excuse for why I couldn't. She'd leave the house dressed to the nines, smelling of expensive perfume, and return late at night, sometimes slightly tipsy. Her explanations were always flimsy, full of inconsistencies that made my suspicions grow. One night, I found a receipt in her coat pocket for an expensive restaurant we had never been to. When I asked about it, she claimed she had gone with a client. But the doubt had already taken root. I began to notice other small things. A new piece of jewelry I hadn't seen before, unexplained charges on our credit card, and a distance in her eyes that made my heart ache. The final straw came when I stumbled upon an unfamiliar cologne on one of her scarves. It was a scent I didn't recognize, and it wasn't mine. When I confronted her, she laughed it off, saying I was being ridiculous. "It's probably just from being in a crowded elevator," she said, but her explanation felt hollow. Despite all the signs, I clung to the hope that I was wrong, that there was a logical explanation for everything. I wanted to believe in the woman I had loved for 2 decades, the woman who had shared my dreams and my life. But the nagging doubt, the growing suspicion, was impossible to ignore. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage, lost in a maze of lies and half-truths. It was then that I decided I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I couldn't continue living in the dark, wondering if the woman I loved was betraying me. I had to find out what was really going on, and I had to be prepared for the possibility that my worst fears were true. The day everything changed started off like any other. Emma left early for work, kissing me on the cheek with a smile that no longer reached her eyes. I watched her drive away, feeling the familiar knot of unease tighten in my stomach. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to uncover the truth. I started by checking Emma's computer. She had a habit of leaving it on, and today was no different. Her emails were innocuous, filled with work-related content and a few notes from friends. But her calendar told a different story. There were numerous appointments listed as meetings, many of them outside of work hours and at odd locations, restaurants, cafes, even a hotel. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the entries, each one a potential clue to her infidelity. Next, I turned to her phone. She'd always been protective of it, but I knew her passcode, an anniversary date she thought I had forgotten. With trembling hands, I unlocked it and started to search. Her text messages were clean, almost too clean. It was clear she had been careful, possibly deleting anything incriminating. But then I remembered the hidden folder feature on her phone, a place where she could store messages and photos she didn't want me to see. I found it quickly enough. My heart raced as I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the contents. There were dozens of messages, photos, and even short videos. The messages were from Sam, and they left little to the imagination. They spoke of secret rendezvous, of longing and passion that had been absent from our marriage for so long. The photos were even worse. Intimate pictures of Emma in lingerie, some taken in our bedroom, others in what looked like hotel rooms. The videos were the final blow, showing Emma and Sam together, their laughter and whispered endearments a stark contrast to the cold distance she had shown me. I felt sick, my hands shaking as I stared at the evidence of Emma's betrayal. The woman in the photos and videos was a stranger, someone I barely recognized. The realization that she had been living a double life, deceiving me for months, if not years, was almost too much to bear. I wanted to smash the phone, to scream, to confront her right then and there. But I knew I needed to be smart about this. I needed to gather as much evidence as possible before I made my move. I copied everything from her phone to my computer, each click of the mouse a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. I felt like a detective piecing together a crime, each new discovery a dagger to my heart. Once I had everything, I put her phone back exactly as I had found it. I didn't want her to suspect anything until I was ready. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. When Emma came home that evening, I had to force myself to smile, to act as if nothing had changed. We ate dinner in silence, the weight of what I had discovered pressing down on me like a physical force. She chatted about her day, her laughter grating on my nerves, each word a lie. I nodded in all the right places, barely hearing what she was saying. My mind was consumed with thoughts of her and Sam, of the betrayal that had torn our marriage apart. That night, as Emma slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't keep this charade up for long. The anger and hurt were too intense, the need for confrontation too strong. I needed to confront her, to hear her explanation, even if I already knew it would be filled with more lies. But I also needed to think about my next steps, about how to protect myself and our assets from the fallout of her infidelity. The next day, I called a private investigator. I needed concrete proof, something I could take to a lawyer. The investigator, a woman named Lisa, was sympathetic and professional. She assured me that she would get the evidence I needed, and within a week, she had delivered. Photos of Emma and Sam meeting at a hotel, timestamps from their secret rendezvous, even recordings of their conversations. It was damning, irrefutable proof of her affair. With the evidence in hand, I contacted a lawyer. I explained the situation, providing the evidence I had collected. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, laid out my options. We discussed the best way to confront Emma, how to protect my financial interests, and what to expect in the divorce proceedings. It was a cold, clinical discussion about the end of my marriage, but it was necessary. That evening, armed with the truth and a plan, I prepared to confront Emma. I waited until she came home, watching her as she moved through the house, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. When she finally settled on the couch, I took a deep breath and joined her. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of anger and fear coursing through me. "Emma," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. "We need to talk." She looked up, her eyes widening slightly at the serious tone in my voice. "What is it, David?" she asked, her voice innocent and sweet, a mask that no longer fooled me. "I know about you and Sam," I said, holding her gaze. "I know everything." The color drained from her face, her eyes darting away from mine. For a moment, she was silent, and then she began to speak, her voice rising in hysteria. "David, it's not what you think. I can explain." But I had heard enough of her lies. "Save it, Emma. I have all the evidence I need. The messages, the photos, the videos. You can't deny it." She tried to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No more lies. We're done. I'm filing for divorce." Emma's face twisted with a mix of fear and fury. "You're throwing everything away over a misunderstanding?" she spat, her voice trembling. "It's not a misunderstanding, Emma. I saw everything. The messages, the photos, the videos," I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding. She tried to feign ignorance, but her facade quickly crumbled. "David, please. You have to believe me. It was just a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything," she pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. "Didn't mean anything?" I echoed, my anger rising. "You carried on with him for months. You lied to my face every day. How could that mean nothing?" Her tears turned to anger. "You were never there for me, David. You were always working, always too busy for me. I was lonely. I needed someone, and Sam was there." "So it's my fault?" I asked, incredulous. "I worked to provide for us, for our future. And you repay me by sleeping with someone else." She didn't respond, her silence speaking volumes. The room was thick with tension, the weight of our shattered trust hanging heavily between us. "Do you even love me anymore?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. I don't know, David. Things haven't been the same for a long time." Her admission cut deep, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. "Well, it's clear to me now," I said, standing up. "I can stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. We're done, Emma. I'm filing for divorce." Her eyes widened in panic. "David, no. Please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can fix this." But I'd made up my mind. "There's nothing left to fix, Emma. You've destroyed everything. I'm leaving tonight." I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "David, please! Think about what you're doing. Think about everything we've built together." I shook her off, my resolve unwavering. "I am thinking about it, Emma, and I can't live like this anymore." Her tears fell freely now, but I couldn't let them sway me. I walked out of the room, her sobs echoing behind me. I packed a bag, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of relief. As I left the house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The future was uncertain, but I knew I couldn't continue living a lie. It was time to rebuild my life, piece by painful piece. I checked into a hotel for the night, the sterile room a stark contrast to the home I had left behind. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about the years I had spent with Emma, the good times and the bad, and wondered how it had come to this. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Karen, to discuss the next steps. We went over the evidence I had collected, and she assured me that we had a strong case. "We'll get through this, David. It won't be easy, but you'll come out stronger on the other side," she said, her tone firm but reassuring. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Emma tried to reach out to me multiple times, but I refused to speak to her. I needed to focus on myself, on healing and moving forward. I leaned on my friends and family for support, their presence a comforting balm to my wounded heart. I spent time with my best friend Jack, who had been through a similar situation years ago. He listened without judgment, offering advice and a shoulder to lean on. "You're doing the right thing, David," he said one evening as we sat in his backyard. The cool breeze a welcome relief from the day's heat. "You deserve better than this." His words resonated with me, giving me the strength to keep pushing forward. I threw myself into my work, the familiar routine providing a much-needed distraction. I also started therapy, the sessions helping me process my emotions and begin the journey of healing. One day, as I was sorting through some old photos, I came across one of Emma and me on our wedding day. We looked so happy, so in love. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of closure. That chapter of my life was over, but I had the power to write the next one. As the months passed, the pain began to dull, replaced by a growing sense of hope. I started to see a future beyond the betrayal, a future where I could find happiness again. Emma's betrayal had shattered my world, but it had also shown me my own strength. I was ready to rebuild, to start anew. And so, with a heart still mending but a spirit unbroken, I began the next chapter of my life. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was mine, and I was determined to make the most of it. Despite my resolve to move forward, the betrayal gnawed at me. It wasn't enough to simply walk away from Emma and our broken marriage. I needed to reclaim my dignity, to make her understand the depth of the pain she had caused. The anger simmered beneath the surface, growing stronger with each passing day. It became clear that I couldn't find closure without confronting Emma and Sam and making them face the consequences of their actions. The opportunity for revenge presented itself sooner than I expected. A mutual friend, unaware of our situation, invited me to a dinner party. Emma and Sam would be there. I hesitated at first, unsure if I could handle being in the same room as them. But then, a plan began to form in my mind. This could be the perfect chance to expose their affair and take back some of the power they had stolen from me. The night of the party, I dressed meticulously, aiming to project confidence and control. I arrived early, greeting our friends with a smile that belied the turmoil inside. I watched the door, waiting for Emma and Sam to arrive. When they finally walked in, arm in arm, my heart pounded with a mixture of anger and anticipation. Emma spotted me first, her eyes widening in surprise and fear. Sam, oblivious to the tension, greeted me with a casual nod. I forced a smile, playing the part of the polite guest as the evening unfolded. I bided my time, waiting for the right moment to strike. As dinner was served, I made sure to sit across from them, maintaining a veneer of civility while the storm raged inside me. Our friends chatted and laughed, unaware of the undercurrent of hostility. I waited until everyone was relaxed, the wine flowing freely, before making my move. Raising my glass, I cleared my throat. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, my voice steady. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at me, including Emma and Sam. "To friends old and new," I began, my gaze locking onto Emma's. "To honesty and loyalty, qualities that should be cherished in any relationship." Emma's face paled, her eyes pleading silently with me to stop. But I continued, my tone growing colder. "And to the truth, which always has a way of coming to light, no matter how hard we try to hide it." The room was deathly quiet, the air thick with tension. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, tapping a few buttons to bring up the evidence I had gathered. "I'd like to share something with you all," I said, my voice hard. "A little insight into the kind of person my wife has become." I played a video, the one that had haunted my nightmares for weeks. The room filled with the sound of Emma's laughter, followed by her intimate moments with Sam. Gasps of shock and disbelief echoed around the table as our friends watched in stunned silence. Emma's face was a mask of horror, while Sam's turned a sickly shade of green. When the video ended, I looked directly at Emma. "This is what you've done, Emma. This is the woman you are," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "You've betrayed me, our marriage, and everything we stood for." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no pity. "David, please, she started. But I cut her off. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't try to explain. There's no excuse for what you've done." I turned to Sam, who sat frozen, unable to meet my gaze. "And you," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "You thought you could sneak around and no one would find out. Well, now everyone knows." The room was thick with silence, our friends too shocked to speak. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't enough to heal the pain, but it was a start. I stood up, pushing my chair back. "I deserve better than this, and I won't let you two make a fool of me any longer," I said, my voice strong. "Goodbye, Emma. Goodbye, Sam. Enjoy your evening." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving behind the stunned faces and the shattered remnants of my marriage. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a surge of freedom. The revenge had been bittersweet, but it was a necessary step in reclaiming my life. Over the next few weeks, the fallout from the party rippled through our social circle. Friends reached out, expressing their shock and support. Emma tried to contact me multiple times, but I ignored her calls and messages. I had said everything I needed to say. Now it was time to focus on my own healing. Sam, it turned out, was also married. His wife, upon learning of the affair, filed for divorce immediately. The scandal rocked our small town, and both Emma and Sam became pariahs. It was a harsh lesson in the consequences of their actions, one that I hoped would leave a lasting impact. As for me, I continued to see my therapist, working through the anger and betrayal. The road to recovery was long, but with each passing day, I felt a little stronger. I threw myself into my work, expanding my business and finding solace in the routine. I reconnected with old friends, went on long hikes, and rediscovered passions I had set aside during my marriage. In time, I even began to think about the possibility of love again. I knew it wouldn't be easy to trust someone new, but I was determined not to let Emma's betrayal define the rest of my life. I deserved happiness, and I was willing to fight for it. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to forge. And with each step, I moved further away from the shadows of the past, towards a future filled with hope and possibility. Months had passed since the night of the dinner party, and life had begun to settle into a new kind of normalcy. The divorce proceedings were well underway, and the once overwhelming pain of Emma's betrayal had dulled to a manageable ache. I had thrown myself into my work and therapy, both of which provided structure and purpose, but there was still one more loose end that needed to be tied up: a final conversation with Emma. She had been persistent in her attempts to reach out, sending texts and leaving voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. I had ignored them all, needing space to heal and find my footing, but now I felt ready to face her one last time, to say the things that needed to be said, and finally close this painful chapter of my life. I arranged to meet Emma at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a neutral place where we could talk without the weight of our shared history bearing down on us. I arrived early, choosing a table in the back corner where we could have some privacy. As I waited, I sipped my coffee and tried to steady my nerves. This conversation was necessary, but it wouldn't be easy. Emma arrived a few minutes later, her face a mask of apprehension and guilt. She looked thinner, her eyes shadowed with sleeplessness and regret. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly reminded myself of the hurt she had caused. "David," she greeted me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, gesturing for her to sit down. "Emma," I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible, "we need to talk." She sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her coffee cup. "I've missed you," she began, her eyes filling with tears. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know how sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you." I listened to her words, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. "Emma, what you did was more than just a mistake," I said, my voice firm. "You lied to me, betrayed our marriage, and destroyed the trust we had. Saying you're sorry doesn't change that." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I've been living with the guilt every day. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do is try to make amends." "Amends?" I repeated, my anger flaring. "How do you plan to make amends for something like this, Emma? You shattered our lives, and there's no way to undo that damage." "I know," she whispered, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I know I've lost you, and I know I deserve to. But please, David, I don't want to lose everything. Can we at least try to find a way to be civil, for the sake of our memories, if nothing else?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm not sure I can do that, Emma. It's too soon, and the wounds are still too fresh. I can't pretend that everything is okay because it's not." She nodded again, her sobs quieting. "I understand," she said softly. "But please know that I am truly sorry, and I hope in time you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I looked at her, Seeing the woman I had loved for so many years, and the stranger who had caused me so much pain. Forgiveness felt like an impossibility at that moment. But perhaps one day, I could find a way to let go of the anger and move on. Maybe, in time, I said finally, my voice weary. But for now, I need space to heal. I need to focus on rebuilding my life without you in it. She swallowed hard, her eyes red and swollen. I understand, she said. I'll respect your wishes. And David, I truly hope you find happiness again. You deserve it. I nodded, feeling a small weight lift from my shoulders. This conversation, painful as it was, had brought a sense of closure. Thank you, Emma, I said quietly. I hope you find peace too. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. Then, slowly, I stood up. Goodbye, Emma, I said, turning to leave. Goodbye, David, she replied, her voice barely audible. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for what had been lost, but also a sense of relief. The final conversation with Emma had been cathartic, allowing me to say the things I needed to say and begin to truly move forward. That evening, I went home and poured myself a glass of whiskey, sitting on the porch and watching the sunset. I thought about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road to healing was long, but I was on my way, one step at a time. The day of the trial dawned clear and crisp, the kind of autumn morning that made Maplewood feel alive with possibility. But for me, it was a day filled with dread and determination. I dressed carefully, choosing a suit that made me feel confident and in control. This was the day I would finalize my divorce from Emma and put the last piece of our broken marriage behind me. The courthouse was a stately building in the center of town, its imposing columns and grand steps a reminder of the gravity of the proceedings inside. As I walked up those steps, I felt a mixture of nerves and resolve. I had prepared for this moment, gathered all the necessary evidence, and steeled myself for whatever might come. Emma was already there when I arrived, standing with her lawyer outside the courtroom. She looked anxious, her eyes darting around as if searching for some escape. When she saw me, she gave a tentative smile, but I couldn't return it. This was not a day for pleasantries. Our lawyers exchanged greetings, and we were ushered into the courtroom. It was a small, sterile room, the walls lined with dark wood paneling, and the air heavy with the scent of old paper and dust. We took our seats, Emma on one side, me on the other, a gulf of empty space between us that felt wider than the Grand Canyon. The judge, a stern-looking woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, entered the room. We all stood as she took her seat, and the proceedings began. My lawyer, Karen, presented our case with meticulous detail, laying out the evidence of Emma's infidelity and the impact it had on our marriage. She spoke calmly and clearly, her words slicing through the air like a knife. Emma's lawyer tried to counter, painting a picture of a lonely woman driven to desperation by her husband's neglect. It was a narrative that might have swayed me once, but now it felt hollow and manipulative. I listened in silence, my anger simmering just below the surface. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and faced the judge, my heart pounding in my chest. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. I loved my wife deeply, and I worked hard to provide for our future. I trusted her completely, and she betrayed that trust in the most painful way possible. I ask for a fair settlement that reflects the damage done and allows me to move forward with my life. The judge nodded, her expression unreadable, and turned to Emma. Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything to say? Emma stood, her eyes filled with tears. Your Honor, I made a terrible mistake, and I regret it every day. I know I hurt David, and I'm deeply sorry. But I hope we can reach an agreement that is fair to both of us, and that allows us to rebuild our lives separately. The judge listened, then reviewed the evidence and arguments presented by both sides. After what felt like an eternity, she delivered her ruling. The terms of the divorce were fair but firm. I was granted the house, the majority of our shared assets, and a financial settlement that reflected the impact of Emma's betrayal. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and closure. As the judge finalized the proceedings, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of the past few months seemed to lift, leaving me lighter and freer. Emma and I exchanged one last look, a mixture of sadness and resignation in her eyes. I nodded slightly, acknowledging the end of an era. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs and clearing my mind. Karen walked up to me, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. "You did well, David," she said. "This was the best possible outcome." "Thank you, Karen," I replied, shaking her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled. "Take care of yourself, David. The hard part is over, but the healing is just beginning." As she walked away, I stood there for a moment, taking in the reality of my new life. The divorce was final, and Emma was no longer a part of my future. It was a bittersweet realization, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter. That evening, I went back to the house that was now mine alone. It felt different, as if the air itself had changed, becoming lighter and more welcoming. I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was a brilliant tapestry of oranges and pinks, a reminder that even the end of something could be beautiful. I thought about the journey I had been on, the pain and betrayal, the moments of doubt and anger. It had been a harrowing experience, but it had also taught me so much about myself and what I was capable of enduring. I realized that I'd come out stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever the future held. The next day, I woke up with a sense of purpose. I decided to take some time off from work to travel, to explore new places and rediscover the world outside of Maplewood. It was time to reclaim my life and find joy in the small moments. As I packed my bags, I felt a surge of excitement and anticipation. The road ahead was unknown, but it was filled with possibilities. I was ready to embrace the adventure, to write the next chapter of my story on my own terms. With one last look around the house, I locked the door and stepped into the future. The journey of healing and self-discovery awaited, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. The trial had been the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of another, filled with hope, growth, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The next few months were a whirlwind of exploration and self-discovery. I traveled to places I had always dreamed of visiting, but never had the time for. From the bustling streets of New York City to the serene landscapes of the Pacific Northwest, I immersed myself in new experiences and found joy in the freedom of solo travel. Each destination offered a new perspective, a fresh start. I hiked through dense forests, climbed mountains, and stood in awe of natural wonders. With every step, I felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and peace. The beauty of the world around me was a stark contrast to the turmoil I had left behind, and it helped me heal in ways I hadn't expected. During my travels, I kept a journal, documenting my thoughts and experiences. Writing became a therapeutic outlet, allowing me to process my emotions and reflect on my journey. I found myself looking forward to each new day, eager to see what adventures awaited. One evening, while sitting by a campfire in a remote corner of Yosemite National Park, I met a fellow traveler named Sarah. She was a photographer, capturing the beauty of the natural world through her lens. We struck up a conversation, sharing stories of our travels and the personal journeys that had led us there. Sarah's passion for photography was contagious, and she offered to teach me the basics. As we hiked through the park, cameras in hand, I discovered a new way to see the world. Photography became more than just a hobby. It was a way to capture and cherish the moments that made life beautiful. Our friendship deepened over the weeks we spent exploring together. Sarah had her own story of heartbreak and healing, and we found solace in each other's company. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people finding their way forward, one step at a time. Eventually, it was time for both of us to continue our separate journeys. We exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch. As I watched Sarah drive away, I felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. She had become an important part of my healing process, and I knew I would always cherish the memories we had created together. Returning to Maplewood felt different this time. The town that had once been the backdrop for my pain now seemed filled with possibilities. I reconnected with old friends, finding comfort in their support and understanding. My business had thrived in my absence, thanks to my dedicated employees, and I threw myself back into work with renewed energy. I also continued my therapy, focusing on building a healthier relationship with myself. Dr. Ellis, my therapist, helped me navigate the complexities of trust and self-worth. Healing is not linear, he reminded me during one session. It's a journey with ups and downs, but you're making progress, David. One day, while browsing through a local bookstore, I stumbled upon a photography exhibit featuring Sarah's work. Her stunning images captured the essence of our shared experiences, and I felt a surge of pride and happiness for her. Seeing her success reminded me of my own growth and the new passions I had discovered. Inspired, I decided to showcase my own photography. I approached the local community center and arranged to host an exhibit of my travels. The event was a success, drawing friends, family, and even strangers who appreciated the beauty of my journey. It was a testament to my resilience and a celebration of the new life I had built. One evening after the exhibit, I received a message from Sarah. She was in town for a few days and wanted to catch up. We met at a cozy cafe, and it felt like no time had passed at all. We talked about our adventures, our growth, and the new paths we were forging. As we walked through the streets of Maplewood, I realized how far I had come. The anger and pain of Emma's betrayal were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had found strength in myself, embraced new passions, and opened my heart to new possibilities. David, Sarah said, her voice gentle, you've come a long way. I'm proud of you. Thank you, Sarah, I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest. I couldn't have done it without you. We paused by a park bench, the evening sky painted with hues of pink and orange. What's next for you? She asked, curiosity in her eyes. I smiled, looking out at the horizon. I'm not sure, I admitted, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. Whatever it holds, I know I'll be okay. As we sat there, watching the sun set over Maplewood, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey of healing and self-discovery had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. I had found joy in the simple moments, strength in my resilience, and hope in the promise of new beginnings. Life would always have its ups and downs, but I was ready to face them with an open heart and a renewed spirit. The future was an unwritten story, and I was eager to see where it would take me. With a final glance at the setting sun, I turned to Sarah, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought me here. Together, we walked into the evening, ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead.